What's up guys, it's your Standad here, ready to finish off this trilogy of Generation 7 reviews with this one focusing on Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee for the Nintendo Switch. After exploring the tropical worlds of Alola, Pokemon fans around the globe were anticipating something fresh, with talk of a brand new generation on the Nintendo Switch making up a large portion of online community discussion. And once again, the wait for information was relatively short, as Game Freak officially announced Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee on May 28, 2018 to an admittedly tepid response. Sure, Pokemon Go was a massive success for the world's most bankable media franchise, but having its cartoonish style and simpler gameplay mechanics infect the first HD release in the main series of games felt like a move designed to alienate the series' more invested patrons in order to lure a more casual audience into the fold. Plus, after both Mega Evolution and Alolan forms heavily pandered towards Pokemon's inaugural region, the Kantonian fanservice was far past the point of feeling stale and unfair. And then there was the actual question of whether or not these simplified remakes would even be a part of the main series at all, with many arguing that due to the title and a lack of mechanical consistency, that they existed in a new subsection of the series altogether. However, upon their global release in November of 2018, it became clear that these Pokemon Yellow reimaginings were indeed better and more faithful than even the most jaded fans would care to admit. And after receiving lower than usual, but still encouraging reviews and sales topping 3 million units in the first week alone, the highest numbers for a Switch game at the time, it was clear that this unusual experiment had paid off. After all, these installments looked gorgeous on Nintendo's new hybrid system, had plenty of quality of life upgrades compared to the originals and arguably even their 2004 remakes, and shook up the gameplay enough to encourage gamers to experience a historically repetitive adventure in a brand new way. But were any of these changes actually any good? And would they be enough to compel even the most hardcore fans to dust off their Joy-Cons and give them a try? Well, curve your wrist and wait for just the right moment, because we're about to zippy zap into Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee for the Nintendo Switch.
Stan, hey, it's me, ROYBOY, man. You need help with your review, dude?
What on earth? Roy, please, no. Get out of here right now. Nobody wants to see another collaboration between us.
I'm just saying, if Game Freak can rehash the same thing 6,000 times, why can't we do the same, huh?
No, seriously, please just go. I can actually feel the cringe pouring through the screen right now, and I'm pretty sure 17 of my viewers just went to watch a Scott Noir's video instead, so seriously.
Okay, fine, but don't you want to hear my thoughts on what a soulless cash grab these games are? I mean, it's like, are you kidding me? You're gonna get Eevee and
I am so sorry about that, folks, but without further delay, let's go. I honestly feel like starting anywhere besides the presentation would be a disservice to the art team, because to me at least, this is the sort of modern visual style that I've been waiting to see from the franchise ever since I got Pokemon Silver for the Game Boy Color. It's heightened and cartoony, yes, but it has so much effort and personality that I imagine, like Wind Waker, it's going to hold up for generations to come. I get that some players out there actually prefer a more refined and serious look, and it's pretty clear that at least visually, the series can still push the envelope even further, but for the first Game Freak produced home console Pokemon installment, I think it does its job remarkably well, and even 3 years later, this is still peak aesthetic for me. As for the music, I mean, it's good. There's certainly some wonderful tracks, but let's be real, there have been so many visits and revisits through Kanto over the years that it must be a challenge for any modern day composer to remix these familiar tunes into something new or surprising. Musical director Shota Kageyama and his talented team did a decent job with solid reimaginings of classic tracks like Lavender Town and the main gym theme, while also getting to flex their musical muscles on newer arrangements like the Staff Roll and Master Trainer battle songs. Look, what can I say? I think Generation 1 boasts the series' most iconic melodies, and whether it's in the original's more dated sound fonts or orchestrated to perfection, I'm never going to get sick of hearing the rich soundtrack of Kanto, even if this is now like the 5th time hearing it. However, when it comes to this often revisited setting, I've gotta say I do wish that there was more done to make it stand apart from what's come before. Sure, everything you remember aside from the Safari Zone, Game Corner, and Cycling Road return with most of their original fanfare still intact. But aside from being able to see things from a higher perspective during the post-game, there's nothing too original about these Pokemon Yellow reimaginings. Heck, they didn't even include Fire Red and Leaf Green's Sevi Islands, which results in a feeling of less. Like, I can understand not including a competitive battling facility, or even necessarily allowing players to visit a place originally designed in order to catch Johto and Hoenn Pokemon, but seriously, you can't even build one singular island or something that maybe has ties to Alola? It could have been an organic way to tie the events of the other Gen 7 titles into everything here. And it might even explain why, despite only incorporating the original roster of 151 Pokemon, Alolan forms can be caught and registered even if they're not the easiest to obtain. I don't know, to me it just feels like a wasted opportunity, and speaking of, I think now's the perfect time to get into the most controversial aspect found in Let's Go, which is their simplified approach to gameplay. Let's get something straight, if you dislike Pokemon Go on a fundamental level, then these installments will not be enjoyable to you at all. Because for the most part, Pikachu and Eevee retain the capture and item mechanics from that mobile phenomenon to an almost 1-to-1 ratio. Gone are the days of hold items and Eevee training, because despite featuring a battling system that retains 90% of familiarity, these remakes are focused on one thing, and that's capturing as many Pokemon as possible. And while you can still battle certain static or legendary pocket monsters, at the end of the day, you'll need to forget about Quick Claws and moves like Yawn, because in this version of Kanto, berries and timing are king. And while I don't mind this more relaxed version of capture in theory, what I don't understand is why, at least in docked mode, everything has to feel so particular. Like, I'd completely forgotten that for one reason or another, these titles refuse to pair with a Switch Pro controller. And because of that, I was forced to play with only my right Joy-Con, which resulted in my aim being, well, it wasn't great. And yeah, it did get better as the campaign went on, but why simplify everything players have come to expect in order to make it quote-unquote easier when figuring out the proper motions to ensure easy capture is anything but? And look, I know some of you out there have chained multiple species across dozens of shiny hunts and have the controls absolutely mastered, but again, my point is directed at the casual audience the Game Freak was so desperate to entice. I will concede though, from a mobile perspective, everything runs and feels great, and with more control and better performance than ever, I imagine this is the preferred method of play for most people out there. Moving on to something less controversial though, despite being developed as direct remakes of Yellow version and featuring many of that particular game's storyline and characters, I think it was a brilliant decision to leave the protagonist of those games behind and instead make way for a new generation of player characters in the form of Chase and Elaine, as well as their new rival Trace. Now, don't get too excited because for the most part, these analogous counterparts share their predecessors' familiar traits and the lack of personality. But if you're going to produce a remake of a generation that's already been remade once, then I'm glad we got something a bit different. And hey, Red, Blue, and even Green all show up throughout your adventure as veteran trainers who test your abilities in varying ways. And Blue even introduces us to Mega Evolution and takes over for Giovanni at the end of the game's main narrative, setting the stage for his role in any Johto-specific remakes we may eventually see. As for the narrative itself, well, it's virtually a clone of what's come before, with slightly expanded roles for your rival, Jesse, James, and Meowth, as well as the aforementioned Blue and Archer, who, as an admin of Team Rocket, is positioned directly underneath Giovanni.
Phrasing?
All jokes aside, like Blue, this feels like a change designed for future connectivity, as he was your main antagonist in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and in a post-game encounter, he sets the stage for an eventual similar role. It's not a lot, but it's a nice bit of fan service, and I hope one day these seeds grow into something great. But I will say, while it was cool to see how they expanded certain characters' roles, it feels a little weird that they didn't use this as an opportunity to flesh out and define this version of Lance, given I imagine he'll be equally as important in any potential sequels. Like, Lorelei actually shows up around 1/3 of the way into your adventure, which was a nice touch and helped to make her particular Elite Four battle feel a bit more engaging later on. But aside from a handful of mentions, no other members of this mighty group interact with or assist you in any way during regular gameplay. And to me at least, and especially in the case of Lance, this feels like a major missed opportunity. But of course, I still haven't even mentioned the most important character, your starter, who accompanies you for the entire duration of your playthrough. To me at least, this is a classic tale of a boy or a girl and their dog. And with Pikachu and Eevee in the role of loyal companion, and being incredibly OP stats-wise, they'll gleefully battle, play, and dress up with you till your heart's content. It's a surprisingly well-executed relationship, and on top of being able to learn both out-of-type as well as HM moves to ensure they'll never become replaceable, I also love the cutscenes that are used to further develop your bonds throughout the campaign, eventually culminating with your partner giving you a bouquet of flowers to signify how much they love you before the credits roll. It's probably the single best example of a strong player and Pokemon relationship across the entire main series. And though you're never forced to utilize them on your team, it's moments like these that make you want to, despite having over 100 other options to choose from. And yes, in this version of Kanto, the Pokédex stops just past number 151, making your potential crop of party members effectively identical to your options back in 1999. And while that sort of sucks for fans of Johto and beyond, I think I'm actually more upset about the game's decision to not allow Pikachu and Eevee to evolve, which, while I assume comes from the same line of thinking as the Kanto-only roster, sort of removes the entire purpose of giving us Eevee. I mean, Pikachu is one thing, but seriously, you're going to take evolution away from Eevee. You know, the literal evolution Pokemon. It just feels like yet another example of Game Freak removing options and choice from a series built on that very mechanic. And while I enjoy dressing my partner up to give it its own creative identity, and I understand that they're trying to be authentic to Yellow version, a big part of me just wishes I could have evolved my Pikachu into one of my favorite Pokemon. But hey, I admit it's a smaller, more personal gripe, and it certainly isn't a game ruiner. Unlike the pacing, which, okay, maybe that's a bit hyperbolic and it's certainly nothing new, but while I'm thrilled that there's still plenty of NPC trainers to battle and actual gym leaders who require some form of strategy and preparation to defeat, I can't believe that in a game designed with casual and Go fans in mind, that the amount of repetition and grinding in Kanto is still this brutal. Now, to be fair, the latter isn't quite so bad, as if you want, you can go out and catch a bunch of Pokemon, receiving much more experience for doing so than battling. But for someone like myself who isn't interested in chaining Geodudes all day, that meant taking on as many NPCs as possible to make sure my team was properly leveled. And aside from Cycling Road, which was remodeled due to a new feature I'll discuss later, all of Kanto's worst paced areas are still intact in this modern take on the region. Which just sucks, and it honestly feels like it's in direct conflict with the rest of these games. Sure, it's not so bad for the first half or so, with Mount Moon and Rock Tunnel not being particularly fun, but eventually you get past Erica and the world opens up, only to force bird keepers and swimmers down your throat until you just decide to skip them entirely. Seriously, I have never gone out of my way to avoid quite as many trainers, and maybe it's because I was getting additional experience from my handful of catches, or maybe it's due to the contradiction I just spoke about, but this was the game that made me throw my hands up in the air and walk away from battle when it wasn't absolutely necessary. Of course, it's not all bad given that there's at least no more wild encounters, instead actually having the Pokemon models pop up so that you're aware of possible Poke battles beforehand. But even this additional degree of choice doesn't make up for this poorly implemented oversight and unwanted padding. Also, while we're on the topic of bad decisions, whoever thought of making the gym guy essentially an arbiter of entry should straight up be fired. How on earth is this a good decision? Sure, on paper, maybe having an NPC check the player's progress to ensure they're capable might sound like an alright idea, but in practice, all it does is force players to adjust how they choose to play a game that was originally designed with freedom and multiple pathways in mind. And all in order to please this judgy asshole. The worst has to be Fuchsia though, where he won't even let you in if you haven't caught at least 50 different Pokemon species. And look, I know that at this point in the campaign, you're probably fairly close to that number anyways, but there are legitimately some people, especially younger and inexperienced players, who actually don't just catch whatever new Pokemon they see. And once again, this decision feels like it's in direct opposition to the audience that these titles were primarily marketed towards. That being said, aside from this Professor Oak wannabe, the gyms themselves are more immersive than ever, with actual spectators in attendance and reimagined puzzles and gimmicks that only serve to make their leaders more memorable. With a special shout out to Blaine and his Quiztacular Gym, which is so wacky and cartoonish that it single-handedly raised the mad scientist into my favorite side character in the entire game. And man, oh man, the backgrounds. This is something that I've been meaning to discuss in my more recent in-depth reviews, but starting with X and Y, the specifically implemented backdrops that accompany your battles are a wonderfully immersive touch. And whether it's seeing Blaine's quiz machine or setting the stage for something a little more epic, they only add in making the modern era feel more alive. Moving on to some more noticeable adjustments though, let's discuss some differences found within this Gen 1 reinterpretation, and first up we have both Coach and Master Trainers. The former are basically route boss fights who have stronger Pokemon to challenge, but will award you with some pretty decent TMs or specialized candies if you manage to beat them. While the latter are only encountered during the postgame and essentially act as a mirror match to determine the strength of one particular species of Pokemon. And when I say one species, I mean it, as there are 153 of these Poke Specialists to defeat, with a handful only requiring you to prove your Pokemon superiority by measuring combat power, which, like in Pokemon Go, is a number that defines a Pokemon's overall ability. But why 153? Well, due to its deep connection to the mobile game, this version of Kanto is home to two brand new mythical Pokemon named Meltan and Melmetal, who are only obtainable through direct connection to Go. You see, instead of featuring an updated version of the Safari Zone, Let's Go instead boasts the aptly named Go Park, which allows for your Nintendo Switch and mobile device to pair up and transfer Pokemon from Pokemon Go into these titles. But be warned, it's not a marriage, but rather more like a delivery, as once you've gone ahead with the transfer, there's no way to return them or even send anything from the Switch installments into the app. I can only imagine this was done in order to keep Niantic's precious infrastructure and subsequent revenue streams intact. But regardless, it's a great way for players to fill out their Pokédex and import shiny or Alolan creatures into Kanto. Although being forced to catch your own Pokemon twice is both redundant and at times far more difficult than it needed to be, especially for the mythical Blob and other strong and legendary monsters. But hey, it might be worth it to transfer in some of the flying ones because, as I alluded to earlier, Dragonite, Aerodactyl, and of course the Golden Child itself have been turned into Sky Pokemon, which allows for airborne travel as well as the chance to encounter rarer flying types and even the legendary birds if you're lucky enough.
I guess they're not so legendary after all.
Shut up, Roy. Anyways, you're actually encouraged to take all 153 Pokemon out of their balls while exploring the region. And while most won't be soaring through the skies like Charizard, many do have some sort of visual distinction or special ability to enjoy, such as Lapras and Gyarados surfing, or my personal favorite, Snorlax, who carries you around on its enormous belly. Which, for someone like myself who understands the love for walking Pokemon but never thought of it as a make or break feature, it makes me excited to see how future generations might treat this companion mechanic going forward. But hopefully those games don't lock an entire Pokemon behind a gimmicky peripheral, because the Pokeball Plus, a device that could be paired with the game and acted like a spherical Joy-Con, did exactly that. Now, I actually did purchase the deluxe bundle that included it, but for one reason or another, I never got around to actually using the damn thing, and somewhere along the way, I lost the charging cord, so my poor Mew is locked in its motion-controlled prison until I get a new one. So apologies on not having more to say about it, but at the end of the day, it really does feel like a glorified amiibo in the worst ways possible. And it makes me mad that 1, it costs so much money, and 2, they put time and resources into a gimmick rather than enabling Pro Controller support. But aside from those oversights, as well as a disappointing post-game, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee are harmless interpretations that, while clearly made for a more casual Pokemon audience, do still possess enough style and nostalgia to make older players give them a shot. And while they may be poor replacements for those who are more competitively minded and swear by the other Kantonian remakes, I do believe they're harmless enough and might be worth your time if you're willing to adjust to their simpler mechanics and goofier world. They're far from my personal favorite games in the series, and at times they feel like they're in direct conflict with their own target demographic, but despite the Let's Go branding and the weird new gameplay, they're 100% authentic to Pokemon's original catch-em-all spirit, unlike another pair of games we'll be discussing very soon. By Arceus's beard, we actually did it. 3 reviews in just about 3 months. As you can imagine, between this much Gen 7 and the Emerald Battle Tower 3 times a week on twitch.tv/randomtens, I'm sort of at my escape rope's end when it comes to playing and analyzing Pokemon. So as I normally do, I'll be taking a few months away from this review series to focus my efforts on some other content for the channel. I'm sure many of you are eager to get my take on the most controversial generation yet, but these breaks between major titles helps me recharge and approach them in the most objective way possible. Anyways, that's all for now, but please let me know if you liked the Let's Go games and if you'd want a Johto-specific sequel in the comments section down below. Also, make sure to like, subscribe, and ring that bell if you haven't done so already. Please share this video with your friends as it helps the channel a lot, and as I always say, happy hunting, baby rhinos. Oh, and the next video going live on the channel is going to be a brand new episode of The Rarest. You guys are still into collectibles, right? Anyway, see you soon, gamers. Bye. As always, thanks a ton to my wonderful members for keeping this entire ship upright. If you'd like to help me make videos and see your name among these beautiful people listed here, consider joining today. It really does allow me to continue producing these longer videos in spite of YouTube's harmful algorithms, so any support is seriously appreciated. You can become a member by signing up down below. And as for the secret emoji, this time make sure you post a jack-o'-lantern head. I don't know why, I just really love this weird inside joke. Anyways, keep on keeping on, stay safe out there, friends, and I hope to see you guys soon.
Alright, so I don't exactly know what I'm supposed to do, so I'm just gonna like stand here and do a couple different things, and you can just edit what one you want.